I'm getting at for the Labour Party, their point is simply, look, all these MPs opposed the war, as did millions of Labour Party members, hundreds of thousands. The fact is, only you took that further step, albeit on the basis of a war you thought was illegal.
I don't actually think that's correct, but it's not only I who thought it was illegal. Most people thought it was illegal. Most people in the country, most jurists, most lawyers, and most international authorities. But the more important issue is the one you raised first. I never, as the transcripts make abundantly clear, the Labour Party's own transcripts make abundantly clear, called on anyone to rise up against our troops. It's my position that the troops should never have been there and should now be withdrawn. That too is a position supported by a majority of people in Britain and by the overwhelming majority of Labour people in Britain. The polls make that clear. The by-election result in Brent East makes that clear. It's Mr Blair who's brought the Labour Party into disrepute, not me.
Right.
If the Labour Party doesn't get rid of him soon, he's going to drag the party down with him.
Well, you raised the issue of by-elections. Will you now stand as an independent against the Labour Party?
I'll certainly be defending my seat in Parliament as an independent. The question of when remains to be seen. This has only just happened. I'm going to my constituency on Saturday. I'll be having my surgery, talking to my constituents, my party comrades there, although I'm not in the party anymore, they're still my comrades and I must consult them and the broader movement. I'm speaking at public meetings every day of the next week around the country.
Why go on inflicting further damage, as this obviously will, to the party that you profess to love and have been a part of for over 30 years?
No, I now intend to make Mr Blair pay for this decision and for all the disastrous decisions that he's been taking on the domestic and the international level.
Right.
They will rue the day, let me predict to you, they will rue the day that they did this, as they rued the day they threw Ken Livingstone out of the Labour Party in London.
George Galloway there. Well, I'm joined now in the studio by the Labour Party chairman, Ian McCartney. Ian McCartney, good evening. Thanks for coming in. Why on earth create a martyr?
We haven't created a martyr, and let's be one thing clear. George Galloway was not expelled from the Labour Party for being opposed to the war. 138 Labour MPs alongside of him oppose the war. Some people oppose it absolutely passionately.
As we pointed out in the interview.
I'm not criticising yourself. I'm just making the point. The complaints were not about his anti-war position. What George Galloway done was unique. Unique among not only those who were opposed to the war, unique among MPs in the British Parliament. Of his own volition, without any pressure, without any prompting, went onto an international television station and made a statement which could be only interpreted in one way. It was to incite people to come across and attack British troops. Those troops were already in place in a conflict. As you said, our sons and daughters. It was a unique intervention by him.
Right.
And it was that intervention that caused an unprecedented level of complaints from Labour Party members and supporters. And it was for that reason and that reason only he's been expelled from the Labour Party.
OK, now where do we go from here? He is clearly going to stand against the Labour Party as an independent. What is the message to anybody within the party who supports him, from MPs downwards?
There is no MP in the Labour Party who supports George Galloway's statement of incitement.
No, I'm talking from thenceforth. Anyone supporting George Galloway, what happens to them? Would they be expelled too?
There is no Labour MP who is going to support George Galloway and his attacks on the Labour Party. I'm quite certain about that. And that includes people that are as passionate as George is about the war. Absolutely as passionate as he is. Members, there will no doubt be Labour Party members who are committed to George, who are his friends. And you'd expect them to support him. I don't argue with that. But one thing
will they be expelled too? I mean, how far does this go? You get my point. You could have opened a real can of worms here.
The rules are always been clear. If people campaign against the Labour Party and against Labour candidates, then they automatically are out of the party. But George hasn't made a decision yet about whether he's having a by-election, and quite frankly that's not relevant. We'll have to wait what George is going to do. That's his business. The one thing is Labour Party...
But he is going to stand against the Labour Party. He has said that, be it by-election, be it general election. And presumably, therefore, any Labour Party members who support that candidacy will be disciplined, at least.
Well,
must be.
The one thing is certain. If George Galloway stands, there will be a Labour candidate and a robust Labour campaign. The big thing about today... must remember, it's a simple issue, this. George Galloway uniquely...
Yes, you've made that point. You have made that point quite clearly, Mr. Carney. Surely the situation now, though, is that outside the party, he's now going to do so much more damage. You could have just drawn a line and thought, well, that's George, he's a maverick, everybody knows him, and gone on minimising the damage to the party.
Labour Party members and Labour supporters were outraged by what George Galloway said, and that's why it's unique. And we took those complaints seriously and investigated them individually and independently. And having independently investigated them, George has brought the Labour Party in disrepute, and he's out the Labour Party, and quite rightly so.
And for good.
He's out the Labour Party. He's been expelled out of the Labour Party.
Ian McCartney, thanks very much for coming in. When we come back, Ian Duncan Smith bats away the critics, repeating his promise to lead the Conservatives into the next election. But how much longer can the Conservative captain sing the same tune?
Maybe I'm a banker who's completely obsessed. Got a little something that's bound to impress. This current account pays a higher amount of extraordinary interest. Extra, extra, I know you want more. I'll give you something extra when you walk through my door. Extra, extra, though I cannot deny. Terms and conditions apply.
It's easy to switch to the current account that pays 25 times more interest than these banks. Halifax, always giving you extra.
Don't forget, there's a free flu jab recommended by GPs for everyone 65 or over, and those in at-risk groups. If you're unsure, see your doctor.
Henry.
Beat the flu before it beats you.
Call your local surgery to book an appointment.
Welcome back. It's 7:30. You're watching Channel 4 News. In a moment, Ian Duncan Smith's attempts to deflect questions about his leadership of the Conservative Party with a policy launch. Did he succeed? But first, our main headlines tonight. The Labour rebel George Galloway says he'll fight on as an independent after being expelled from the party for his anti-Iraq war comments. An American soldier has been killed by guerrillas in Baghdad as the US State Department report emerged, warning of a major security crisis in post-war Iraq. And the Iraq Donor Conference is underway in Madrid. The UN Secretary-General called on the international community, including those who opposed the war, to dig deeper to fund the nation's reconstruction. Now, Ian Duncan Smith was again forced to field questions today about his leadership of the Conservative Party. A speculation about an imminent coup continued. At a press conference during a visit to Loughborough University, he attempted to present Conservative education policy. But, faced with question after question about his leadership, Mr Duncan Smith had to proclaim yet again that he would be leading the party into the next election. Here's our political editor, Eleanor Goodman.
Judging by this morning's press and the rumours still swirling around Westminster, this could be Ian Duncan Smith's last stand. Visiting a sports academy in Loughborough, he tried to laugh off the speculation about his leadership, but the questions came at him one after another, completely obliterating his attempts to talk about policy. For a start, why didn't he agree to a vote of confidence?
Well, John, I was elected by this party to lead this party to the general election, and I'm going to do just that.
Was it true the Chief Whip told him yesterday his support was slipping away?
No, and he made that absolutely clear in a straight quote. And I say to those who, forever report what somebody else has told them, comes a moment when maybe some of you guys have to ask yourself the question, if somebody says absolutely that's not the case, then it's not the case, and I can tell you it's not.
The Chief Whip did deny yesterday having actually told him he'd had it, but the views of the Whip's office is that he wouldn't survive a vote of confidence despite his bravura today.
Would anybody here like to talk about the policies that we have come... Right, thanks.
The Shadow Sports Minister tried to head off the questioning, but it was almost as if Ian Duncan Smith wanted to demonstrate to activists the damage this is doing to the party's message in the hope of getting them to rise up against any MP who openly says he should stand down. Yesterday, the briefing against him was almost all off the record. A small group of senior Conservative MPs phoned journalists to tell them that 5 senior MPs were going to make a move against Ian Duncan Smith that evening. It didn't materialise, and at the moment only 2 have been prepared to come out of the shadows, but they insist that they are gathering support and that they could well have the necessary 25 names within days.
This week, there appears to have been a sea change in mood. The mood now is this has got to stop. And there is only one way of stopping it, which is a formal vote of confidence.
But over this weekend, Mr Duncan Smith's supporters are trying to hit the plotters where it hurts in their constituency parties. Conservative Central Office will urge activists to remind MPs how difficult life would be for them if they go against their local parties. One whose party will no doubt be contacted is Derek Conway, who today called for a contest.
He's got two ways of doing it. He can either say to the chairman of the 22 committee, I want a motion of confidence in the party, and 25 of his friends will sign, and he could be the first one to sign it himself. There is a mechanism for it. If he doesn't go down that route, then ultimately, I think in the next few weeks, the 25 names will be put into Sir Michael regardless.
In Mr Conway's constituency of Bexley and Sidcup, Edward Heath's old seat, opinion was divided, possibly explaining his caution about writing a letter saying Duncan Smith should go.
I don't think there should be a challenge. He was elected by the party in the country, and he was elected with a fairly substantial majority. I think part of the problem has been that certain members of the parliamentary party have been unable to accept that result.
This issue basically needs to be put to bed, and the leadership election, if that's what it is, or a vote of confidence, could be the way to do it.
I cannot see the reason why we should want to keep harping at the leadership, because we're not going to get anywhere.
There is a danger that if Ian Duncan Smith's critics don't make a move soon, the media will stop believing them and doing their dirty work for them. But there is something slightly farcical about the fact that so many Tory MPs will tell you that they think he's lost the confidence of the party, and yet insist that they're not going to be the one to write a letter. But if this weekend they go back to their constituencies and find that their members share their doubts, then next week Ian Duncan Smith could be faced with the choice of either having to resign or fight a vote of confidence, which he would almost certainly lose. Eleanor Goodman, Channel 4 News at Conservative Central Office.
Almost £67 million have been wiped off the share value of the engineering giant Jarvis. That slump came after the firm admitted it laid a section of train track wrongly and allegations that it falsified documents. Tonight, Channel 4 News has learnt that Her Majesty's Railway Inspectorate is investigating whether Jarvis is in breach of the health and safety law, and this could even lead to criminal proceedings. Here's Liam Halligan.
This length of railway looks innocent enough, but it's at the centre of an escalating dispute which could end up in the courts. Trains now passing this 30-mile stretch are once again subject to the speed restrictions which make a nonsense of the timetables. And all because engineering company Jarvis made errors when laying new track. The incorrectly laid track lies between Macclesfield and Stoke-on-Trent on the West Coast Main Line. Jarvis tell us they laid the disputed stretch of rail in August during a heatwave. The rail was stressed into place as is usual, and the completed paperwork sent to Network Rail for certification. But certification was never given. And now, because the track was stressed during particularly hot conditions, there are fears it could crack during cold winter nights.
Well, the danger is really there. It's been alleviated, though, by the 20-mile-an-hour speed restrictions that Network Rail very quickly imposed. That should take the risk away, and it just leads to delayed journeys. As to how Network Rail discovered it, they tell us that they compared the paperwork that they received from Jarvis with reality on the ground and found the two simply did not match. The paperwork said one thing, the track told them something else.
Jarvis, of course, maintained the track at Potter's Bar, where 7 died in last year's derailment. And now Network Rail's investigating new allegations against this private sector contractor. The question is, did Jarvis falsify documents in a bid to gain a safety certificate for maintenance work between Macclesfield and Stoke? From its headquarters in Essex, Jarvis refused all our interview requests today, but the company did issue this statement.
Jarvis takes the allegations of document falsification extremely seriously and is investigating them, but to the best of its knowledge, these allegations are without foundation. The investigation will be concluded as quickly as possible, and a further statement will be made in due course.
Well, it clearly underlines our belief that the railways should be, the railway maintenance should be brought back in-house, that track renewal should be brought back in-house, and that Network Rail should gain control of the infrastructure, because they're clearly not in control, and that would mean bringing work back in-house and renationalising the railways.
Network Rail says it's taking allegations of document falsification extremely seriously. And now Channel 4 News has learned Her Majesty's Rail Inspectorate is tonight examining the disputed track as well. If it chooses to investigate, that introduces the prospect of criminal charges against Jarvis. Whilst unproven, such allegations are playing havoc with Jarvis's share price. Because the company is also part of the consortium involved with last weekend's London Underground derailment, it's been declining all week. Today alone, the company lost 16% of its value, the best part of £70 million.
The concern for Jarvis shareholders certainly has to be that Jarvis's relationship with the government on any government project is very seriously damaged. So not only may they lose the renewal work of rail, which costs them, which makes them about a third of their profits, but going forward they find it very difficult to get other contracts which have in the past proved very profitable indeed for them.
Jarvis recently pulled out of its main rail maintenance contracts, but Network Rail can still consider the company for future renewal work. Whether or not that happens and whether Jarvis can salvage its reputation may now depend on an investigation into a stretch of track laid back in the summer.
Liam Halligan there. Now look at some of the rest of the day's news. She speaks 8 languages, has multiple university degrees and ran a very lucrative business. But ending up behind bars was probably not part of the grand plan. A court in Paris has sentenced a British woman, Margaret MacDonald, to 4 years behind bars for running an international prostitution ring. She's also been fined over £100,000. Allegedly Europe's most influential madam, she oversaw more than 600 women who charged clients hundreds of euros per hour. During the trial, Ms MacDonald described herself as an excellent businesswoman who ran a legitimate escort service. Her lawyer described her reaction to the verdict.
As you can imagine, she is very disappointed by the verdict because she thinks it's too heavy for her. I mean, she has never been sentenced in any court anywhere, and she wants to make an appeal because she wants to explain one more time to the court that in that sort of case, she's the only girl who is paying for everybody, not the clients, not the girls, and it's always the same thing.
Here, a former church school headmaster has been jailed for 15 months for abusing 2 boys. Geoffrey Carney from Hampshire was given a 3-year community rehabilitation order in June, but the Court of Appeal ruled that the sentence was too lenient. Police in Humberside have been given more time to question 2 teenagers in connection with the murder of the skydiver Stephen Hilder. David Mason and Adrian Blair, both 19 years old, were good friends with Mr Hilder and were with him on his last fatal jump. They regularly jumped together with Mr Hilder and carried the coffin at his funeral. He died in July when both the cord and his main and reserve parachute were slashed. A Spanish judge has released a man accused of belonging to an Al-Qaeda cell in Spain for medical reasons. Tessier Lunis, seen here on the left, is a journalist who interviewed Osama bin Laden shortly after the September the 11th attacks. He was charged with providing money and information to Al-Qaeda operatives and recruiting fighters for the organisation. President Vladimir Putin was in Kyrgyzstan opening a new army base this afternoon, but in Moscow, hundreds of mourners braved the weather to attend a memorial for the victims of the Moscow theatre siege by Chechen guerrillas. 130 people died from the effects of a knockout gas used by security forces to try to free the hostages. A memorial was unveiled at the site of the siege. Just 2 days after launching from Kazakhstan, the Soyuz spacecraft carrying Michael Foale has docked at the International Space Station. Michael Foale and Russia's Alexander Kalyeri will spend 200 days aboard the orbital platform. The space station is entirely dependent on cash-strapped Russia for its lifeline to the Earth since the US grounded its shuttles. Quick look at the markets now, and at the close the index of 100 leading shares was down by 50 points a short time ago. The pound was up by 0.5% against the dollar, and sterling was also up against the euro. On to some sports news now, and Aston Villa have terminated the contract of the Turkish defender Alpay Özalan by mutual consent. His contract was due to end in June next year. Alpay made himself somewhat unpopular after his confrontation with England's David Beckham during the recent Euro 2004 qualifier in Istanbul. Cricket and England have recorded the lowest total ever by a touring side in a test in Bangladesh, all out for just 295 runs in Dhaka. After cruising to 137 without loss, England then fell apart. They lost 3 wickets for 3 runs, including ducks for Nasser Hussain and Mark Butcher. Bangladesh resume on 12 for 1 tomorrow, trailing by 80 runs. Now, it is definitely not one of the most relaxing sports, but extreme bikers from around the world have been testing the dramatic rock faces of Utah in the United States. Extreme professional riders at the Zion National Park have been hurling themselves down mountains, hoping to win the $10,000 prize money. Free riders choose their own course and are judged on the difficulty of their selection, control and overall style of their descent. That's definitely not one for the faint-hearted. You could do yourself a nasty. Speaking of which, the weather. The satellite shows very little cloud across the UK, and cold northeasterly breezes across the south will push showers into eastern parts of England and Scotland. Tonight, some showers in northern areas and along eastern and western coasts. Dry inland with some frost, temperatures dipping to -2. Tomorrow, clear inland, while northern Scotland and coastal areas can expect some showers. Staying cold though, temperatures 9 to 11 degrees C.
After the break, we'll be back with the weather from Iraq. We meet up with the families of numbers 55 and 13 in the pack of cards of Iraq's most wanted. And securing Iraq, training the police in human rights, and how it all comes to grief in one bloody Baghdad shootout.
Meet the experts of PC World.
With our trained technicians, we can help in so many ways. Detailed advice,
It could be a number of things.
solving problems, data transfer, saving everything from one hard disk onto another. Upgrades, we can actually fit them here. Our technician training is Microsoft and Intel accredited.
She's very clued up.
A world expert in chocolate. I heard I can use networking.
Step into any PC World and there's an expert here to help.
I think they've undercharged us.
Homebase are hammering down prices. There's an extra 10% off this Friday.
I'm going back in.
Homebase.
Life. It's a great game. Aramis Life, the new fragrance for men.
Welcome back to Baghdad. Now, if the Madrid Conference on Iraq needs anything more than money, it needs security in the country in order to spend it. Yet if the new Iraq is to mean anything, it must balance policing with human rights. I've been out with Iraqi police and prison officers as they train in the ways of human rights. Ironically, the political detainees here, the pack of cards, and the thousands of others detained by US forces are now themselves complaining their rights are being violated. The Americans will only say that the 55 most wanted Saddam ministers and sidekicks, the deck of cards, are in a top security encampment here at the airport. But in all, there are nearly 6,000 political detainees, more here in another secret encampment west of Baghdad. Is he at the airport?
I don't know.
Don't
know even
where he is. Surrounded by her Baathist trinkets, Mrs. Al-Faisal is the wife of number 55 on the cards, Iraq's former ambassador to Moscow. A month after the war, she received this via the Red Cross, and 13 uninformative letters in the 5 months since. She has a hunted sense about her and was uncomfortable about being interviewed. Her son, a doctor at Baghdad Hospital, was joined by the son of number 13, the notorious chief of staff of Saddam's armed forces. Their two fathers are prisoners of war, but the status of thousands of others is far less clear. Working from a dingy office in central Baghdad, there is only one lawyer in the whole of Iraq who dares to represent them. He's been subjected to death threats. But afflicted with throat cancer, Badi Izzat feels he has little to lose. He's been rejected at every turn in his attempts to find out what's happened to his clients. He only knows how they were arrested.
Put
hoods.
Yes, hoods. And when they take them there, they take all their all. Yeah. They put them and they make their hands up from morning to night.
In not allowing him access, he says the new Iraq is already failing its first test of human rights. I mean, some of them may be very guilty.
Yes, of course. Of course, we have many of them are guilty. But no, we don't. We must ask him.
Abu Ghraib is the infamous jail where the victims of today's detainees were hung, or where they languished for life. The Americans are spending millions on new prisons in Iraq. These are the first inmates of what is from henceforth to be called Baghdad Correctional Facility. Human rights is also the watch phrase for the new police training in Iraq. Classrooms at the refurbished police academy are already packed with new recruits, here for police officers and next door for aspiring prison staff. The man in charge of Iraq's new domestic security regime is 6'8" Doug Brand, Deputy Chief Constable of South Yorkshire.
Almost on a day-to-day basis, the confidence of the police is growing. Sadly, because their confidence is growing and they're putting themselves forward, because of the violence of the situation here, they're often getting killed or injured. But it doesn't seem to be affecting their morale.
In a newly spruced up police station nearby, the Chief of Police led us to the cells to test the treatment of those held here.
Asking if there's anybody here who has not yet been seen by the judge. So what will happen to the prisoners then? Could they be here for another week?
But when it comes to the greatest test of all, security on the streets, in this instance at least, the lessons seem to evaporate. Accompanying a police patrol in a quiet Baghdad suburb, no sooner have we left the police station than... We later conclude the police may have been the only ones firing. A chase ensues in this brand new Jeep. A taxi is roughly apprehended. The driver and his passenger are thrown to the pavement. More patrols arrive. No gun is found. The passenger pleads he was on his way to an English class. Finally, the army intervenes. They find an unbadged police wielding a pistol and arrest him. Somehow it's resolved and we trundle back to base with the army this time. Suddenly, another gunshot.
What the f*** is going on?
This time, one of the policemen has accidentally loosed off a shot perilously close to his own foot. Just another day in Baghdad. Now, we may be talking money tonight for Iraq, but what are Iraqi newspapers, nearly 150 of them, talking? Hassan Fatah is the editor of Iraq Today. He joins me now. Hassan, top of the pile, what's the quality number in this country?
I think there's really 3 or 4 top newspapers. Must read for many people is a Sabah, which is a CPA-backed newspaper.
That's therefore backed by Mr. Bremer's outfit,
sure,
by the
indeed.
actual American-backed leadership here.
And you'll basically get the American line in much of this newspaper, for better or for worse.
Any light relief? I mean, any page 3 or anything like that?
You tend to, I think,
there's a cartoon.
In effectively almost every Iraqi newspaper, probably other than the religious ones, you'll find the last page girl. Usually,
right, and she's here. Right. Okay,
yes, indeed.
Good. So the Americans are carrying on where Rupert Murdoch left off.
Indeed.
What else?
Well, this is the real Rupert Murdoch. This is a Zaman, which is published by Ahmed. I'm sorry. By Sahaf, which is it's a relatively well-respected newspaper, and is probably one of the most widely read newspapers in Baghdad.
Any religious input?
Not too much. There's a lot of questions as to sort of what's the backing behind it, but I think this says it all. There's not much religion going on here.
Right, and a dolphin for some reason. No dolphins in Iraq.
No, not too many dolphins.
That's an international story, isn't it?
Yeah, it's certainly an international story. Usually about what's going to. Where you want to be, really.
Now, I mean, quite seriously, what sort of sense do Iraqis have of the outside world's interest in this country?
I think the outside world is flooding in. I think it's being filtered, though, and that's really that's really a function of the newspaper.
And this vast explosion of papers, 150 of them.
Yes.
I mean, are they all the same? Are they radically different from each other?
Well, in essence, the coverage is all the same. One of the most frustrating things about being an editor of an English language newspaper, trying to do a diary of Iraqi newspapers, is that you tend to get the same thing from almost every story, from every newspaper and every story in every newspaper. This is one of the problems, I think. You don't get much of a variety.
That green paper, what does that do for us?
Now, this is a relatively newcomer. This is a Sharq al-Awsat, which is a really well-respected newspaper throughout the Arab world.
Pro-American?
Not really. No, it's much more. It's certainly much more pro-Arab.
So it's questioning what's going on here.
Very much so. It is actually making a splash here. I don't know whether it's the green pages or whether it's the coverage or whether it's its reputation. But in fact, there's news that Zaman had to lower its prices because of this paper.
A tremendous tribute to resilience here that people are able to get 150 papers out here.
To say the least.
Hassan, I'd like to thank you very warmly. Thanks for your newspaper review. And now, as promised, a look at the weather here in Iraq. Dry and hot sums it up, with more of the same tomorrow. Temperatures here in Baghdad will reach 35 degrees Celsius with light winds blowing from the northwest. Hotter still for British troops in the south. There, temperatures will reach 38 degrees. But it'll be much cooler in the north, where high cloud will make it hazy. No sandstorms are forecast. Well, we'll be coming to you again live from Baghdad tomorrow night. But now back to Alex in London for the final headlines.
Thank you, John. Our main headline tonight: the Iraq Donor Conference is underway in Madrid. The UN Secretary-General called on the international community to dig deep to fund the nation's reconstruction. We're back tomorrow at noon, of course, and again at 7 as ever. Till then, that's Channel 4 News. Have a good evening.
We live in a civilised country and ordinary people do give it a chance. And if you mess up, then obviously it's down to you.
I phoned the police. So I've just killed somebody.
It never completely goes away.
Lifer. Living with Murder. Monday at 9 on 4.
Feathers are being ruffled at River Cottage in just a few minutes on 4. But first, business rocks. So what are you going to do about it?
Hi, I'm Richard Reed, one of the founders of Innocent Drinks. Well, actually, the company was started by myself and 2 friends, and for as long as we've known each other, we've always talked about how much we'd love to set up a business together. And after a while, we said to ourselves, look, we should either stop talking about this or get on with it, otherwise we're going to drive ourselves crazy. And from that, we came up with the idea of making something that's completely natural and fresh and really, really good for you. And that was basically how the idea for Innocent was born. For the next 6 months, we were making recipes in our kitchens and trying out different smoothies with our friends and families. But after a while, we realised we needed to do it at a slightly larger scale. So we bought £500 worth of fruit, turned it into our favourite smoothie recipe, and then set up a stall at an outdoor music festival in London. And from the stall, we put up a big sign that said, should we give up our jobs to make these smoothies, and put out a bin that said yes and a bin that said no, and asked people to buy their smoothies and put the bottles in the right bin. Unfortunately, at the end of the weekend, the yes bin was full, so we went in the next day and resigned, and then went about setting up Innocent full time. Well, I think one bit of advice I'd give is if you're thinking about it, then do it. Just give it a go and see how you get on. Secondly, for your idea, you've got to make sure it's a strong, simple, clear idea. And I was always told that if you can't explain your business idea in one sentence to your granny, then you don't have a good business idea. So that's how I got started. What about you?
What's up? My name is Alexander Mosu, and I'm the founder of rnbringtones.com. I wanted a particular ringtone for me, so I started making my own ringtones. I sent the first ringtone to my brother who went to school, naughty boy, and his phone rang. His friend heard it, gave me a call and said, can I have that ringtone? So he went away, his phone rang, somebody else heard it, called me up, can I have that ringtone? I said, okay, well, that's 2 people that's called me. I'm not going to be doing this for free. All right, you give me £1 and, you can have the ringtone. On the same day, I had 27 people ask me for a ringtone. So I thought, well, let me actually sit down and have a look at this because, I've just made 27 quid for just doing one ringtone. To be successful, for me personally, is youth. Can you see that? The ability to have no rent, no electricity, no bills, no nothing. Take that opportunity because you can make as much mistakes as you like and never really regret it. All my ideas was more or less constructed in the front sitting room of my mum's house using the one PC that we had you know, the ideas, the strategy, the planning. Obviously, you know, I couldn't afford an office, but, you know, that was the best place to be in terms of, you know, mixing things up and trying to see if we can make money. That's what I did. Now, how are you going to make a difference in your life?
Have you got the next big idea? If you're under 20 with a budding business idea, commercial or with a social dimension, check out channel4.com/Bedroom Britain. We have tales from River Cottage next.
Princess Diana's butler, Paul Burrell, talks exclusively to us about those explosive letters.
And Matthew Kelly's first major interview since those child sex slurs evaporated, Monday at 5.
Can you remember the last time you were really scared? This weekend, Channel 4 takes a look at what you voted to be the 100 greatest scary moments. Starts Saturday, 9:05 on 4.
John Burton Race takes French leave to go bonding with his son in 30 minutes. First on 4, another double-barrelled named chef has a day out with the birds at River Cottage.
Organic-fed people taste nicer. Seeds of change. We're 100% organic. Are you?